Okay, so factor by grouping. The thing about factor by grouping, and you can see it here, the problem has 4 things in it. So it's like you guys should know, you should be able to recognize, oh, I have to do factor by grouping because I see 4 items in my problem. If you see 4 things in the problem, it's like, oh, light bulb, factor by grouping. So you pair it up. If it's factor by grouping, you have 4 items in the problem. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you pair it up. So you look at the first 2 items. Okay? The 4x to the third minus the x squared. You just look at those 2 things. What do they have in common? Yeah, they both have x's. Okay, even though there's not numbers that they have in common, there's letters they have in common. So it's x. How many x's do they have in common? Like, how many x's could I divide out of each one? 1. Yeah, the most is 2. You could take 2x squared out of each one. So you take out x squared. So the thing you're dividing out goes in the front. If you divide out an x squared, you'd have 4x still left. Because third power, if you minus, if it's second power, third power divided by second power, you minus. So it's 4x. Ooh, what's left here? What's x squared divided by x squared?
0.
Close. 1. When you divide something by itself, yeah, it's 1. Like if it's 5 over 5, that's 1. If it's x divided by x, that's 1. Okay, next grouping. Then you go to the next group. What do these have in common? What can you divide these by?
4.
Yeah, 4 goes into both of them. There's even a bigger number.
8.
Yep. So you got to try to find the greatest common factor. Like, and somebody like right away might think, oh, I could divide these by 2 or I could divide these by 4. But you got to think, is that the greatest thing? You got to really get the greatest thing you can out of it. So we're thinking divide it by 8. Okay, so if I divide by 8, that would give me 4x. See, now what's 8 divided by 8? 1. Good job. Now we basically are just about done. Then you take the 2 things we divided by, those are called the greatest common factors, and you literally put those in a grouping together. You put x squared plus 8, the 2 things you took out of those, and then, don't you see that, a lot of you probably see this, don't these match?
So it would be 4x minus 1.
4x minus 1. The thing that matches goes in the second group. It's kind of weird, you don't have to write squared. It's like condensing this into a FOIL problem. So you don't have to write squared, you just write that in the second group, guys. So the greatest common factors came out, and the things that match, that's good, they match. It's supposed to match. If this wouldn't have matched, we would have done something wrong, like maybe you didn't divide by the highest thing possible. That's factor by grouping. That's basically it. That's not that hard to figure out. Okay, then the other kind I want to go over is a trinomial. But the first number of the problem is not equal to a 1. It's a trinomial when the a number, the first number, is not a 1. Like last week you were doing this worksheet, and it's the trinomial when the leading coefficient is other than 1. It's a harder type. So we're going to go over that kind again. You're going to practice some more of these today too. So again, let me grab a problem we could do. All right, so let's say we had 5v squared minus 27v minus 18. So again, this is going to be a harder one. It's a trinomial when the first thing, this a number, see this is like a, b, c. The a is not a 1, is it? It's a harder number. It's harder to do this one. It's not a perfect square either. Perfect squares were like 9 and 16 and 25 and 36. It's not perfect squares. The first number is not a 1, so it makes it harder to do. So I think I showed it to you last week, but let's go over it again. You know, it doesn't hurt to go over these again. So to do the trinomial when the first number is not a 1, you have to do a times c. So we need a calculator for this too. We're going to have to take a times c. 5 times negative 18. I times them, I got negative 90. I times the first number and the last number of the problem. I got negative 90. And the middle number of the problem is negative 27. That goes at the bottom. Okay, now here's the hardest part. You're going to have to think of numbers that multiply to make 90. I mean, there's a lot of numbers that multiply to make 90. It could be 1 times 90. It could be 2 times something or 3 times something. So I suggest you grab a calculator and take the big number 90 and just try to like divide it by 2 or divide it by 3 and try to figure out what's going to work. So 90 divided by 2 is 45. 90 divided by 3 is 30. So write 3 and 30. 90 doesn't divide by 4, but 90 divided by 5 is 18. Now look at these guys. I'm starting to get a list going. Do you see anything that'll make 27? 3 and 30, good. See, you can get it. It just takes some time to figure it out. 3 and 30, okay. I need it to add up to negative 27. 30 will be negative. Okay, now, this is the hardest kind, guys. So you guys can get it if you just follow the directions, you know. Take a times c. We got that. Now, we're almost done. Now, since the first number is not a 1, now you have to divide over here. Now you're going to have to divide by that a number, which was 5. Now we're going to have to go over here and divide by 5. So 3 divided by 5, that does not make a nice number. 3. Yeah, and we don't want decimals, so you just leave it 3 over 5. That doesn't divide, it's 0.6. We don't need no decimals, just leave it 3 over 5. How about negative 30 divided by 5?
Negative 6.
That's negative 6. And really, you know, if you think of it, that's like 6 over 1. You know, you guys know that it's like negative 6. Okay, so it'd be like over 1. All right, so now I can get the answer written out. The answer, it's weird, but the bottom of the fraction is the variable part that goes first. Like, see, your problem was like 5v squared. So this is going to be like 5v and 1v. It's going to be like 5v in here and 1v here. So the bottom part is the first part. So it's going to be 5v and just goes like bottom up. It'll be 5v plus 3. And this one's 1v minus 6. There's the answer. It's weird, isn't it? But if you follow this process, you'll get them figured out. These are the hardest kind because you have to remember to divide by the a number at the end. And then it's a fraction weird thing, bottom to top, like 1v minus 6, 5v minus 3. What do you think of that? It's doable, you just got to follow all the process. So that's the kind I wanted to go over again today, the harder ones. You know, factor by grouping, they're a little bit longer because they have 4 parts. And this is definitely the harder kind. All right. Okay, so another kind that people get stumped on is when you only have 2 terms in your problem. If you only see 2 terms, 2 things in your problem, then you need to just think of 2 different things. You either need to think, is it a perfect square thing? Are these perfect squares? Like perfect squares are like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. Do you see any numbers like that? Are these perfect squares? Yes or no?
No.
Nope. Okay, so it's not that, but that's what your thinking process. Is it a perfect square thing? Because the perfect square one had 2 items, the difference of squares. Or is it greatest common factor? See, those are the things you want to ask yourself. Okay, you said no, it's not perfect square, so what about greatest common factor? Do these have anything in common at all? Just the n. Yeah, they both have n. Like, they don't have numbers in common, but they both have n. So you just divide by n. Just divide by n. Just take one n out of those. What would be left if you took one n out? 7n minus what? 8. Yep, the n. See, if you have n divided by n, it's just like 1. Yeah, so it's just 8. Okay, now again, we could solve these problems too. That's called factoring. If it would have said solve it. If it says solve, they say equals 0 on them. So what if it said solve it? Do you think you could solve it? To solve it, you just take those things that we just got, like this n, and you equal it to 0, and the 7n minus 8, you equal that to 0. And they're like little tiny problems you solve. So n equals 0, that's one of the answers. Just that little n in the front we pulled out, n equals 0. And this answer, you have to add 8, and then divide by 7. And this answer is going to be 8 divided by 7. Yeah, it doesn't come out nice. So you can just leave it, if you get decimals, you can just leave it as a fraction. So honestly, as you keep going in higher math classes, they want you to leave things as fractions. They don't want, this is called an exact answer, because decimals you have to round them. Decimals aren't, so they call it exact if you leave it as a fraction. So 0 and 8/7 would be the answer for that one.